had an opportunity to take a look at this middle school math team engaged in team-based professional learning. And what they were doing was beginning with data about student achievement by looking at work that their students had actually produced.
One of the things we found last year that killed them was they couldn't go from word problems to the equations.
Okay.
So we worked on it this year.
And teachers were able to identify particular areas where their students were not performing at the rate that they wanted them to, and they were able to target specific strategies that they would try in their classrooms to address those.
And then they wrote the equation. And then we had several equations for them to choose from, and they had to match them up. So it was self-checking at the end. If they had used one equation more than once, they know they made a mistake. Or if they had one left, they knew it fit in there somewhere.
Okay.
So that really helped them just to understand how to write it.
The way teachers can quantify the success of this kind of professional learning is by looking at directly at their students' work, at assessments they are designing for their students in the classroom, looking collectively at work their students are doing from classroom to classroom to classroom, and ultimately by looking at how their students perform on these specific areas of the state assessment. So they have multiple ways of looking at their success: immediate, a little more long-term, and then the big assessment.
Marie, you had that from 7th grade, and that definitely helps them. And then for 8th grade, they're still continuously doing that, so that's another good plus with them. However, some of the things that I saw in some of my students' work that I think they still need, that they're still struggling with, is that when they, this student here, the equation is horizontal, and then they'll start setting it up vertically and then sort of get lost in what it is that they need to do. And so for that, I think with the rectangle boxes that you had, Katie, that'll kind of help them to structure their problems by knowing to stay horizontal with it as opposed to going vertically with it.
This kind of professional learning is the kind of professional learning that is team-based at school, focused specifically on the learning students are engaged in, directly tied to the students' content standards. It is driven by the teachers themselves. There's expertise on this team, and that shared expertise and collective responsibility is going to help all of the teachers in this school be successful, because together they will all be implementing the same high quality instruction, because they're sharing their expertise across classrooms rather than being isolated in their individual classrooms with their individual materials and instructional resources.
But then they're losing the point of the reason you have to divide or multiply by the coefficient that's times that variable is because they need to get 1 times that variable. Because once you have 1 times the variable, then you have what Marie says, you get that 1W or whatever that variable is, and they're switching their signs. They think they still need to keep using an opposite sign.
Now, when we initially started working with the 2-steps equations from with the 1-steps, did you guys continue with the algebra tiles as far as modeling with the algebra tiles, or?
I did for my strategies class, and that really helped. I modeled with the 1-step,
okay.
And then the day before I taught the 2-steps, I modeled with them the 2-step equations and helped them to understand why they divide.
All right, would you mind coming up, Katie, to model that for us? And then maybe Katie could probably come into some of our other classes, you know, as co-teaching to kind of show you exactly what it is that we're doing. Because I think the more tools that we get the kids in their toolbox as far as different methods, that just helps them overall to be able to pull from one of those resources. So is that okay?
There is a good deal of research to support that teacher collaboration improves both their teaching as well as their students' learning. For perhaps 15 or 20 years, we have been looking at what happens in schools when teachers work together. One of the studies, the Newman and Whalage study, that looked at how schools are involved in reform efforts, discovered that when teachers collaborate about curriculum and instruction, that not only were teachers more engaged and excited about their work, but students benefited as well.
You have a buddy and they're $4. How much do you each get? So we make it real life. And then they understand that they need to divide it up. and every X against 2. So once they understand division, they're doing that for a reason. It helps them to understand the problems.
So for this coming week, Katie, we could probably go in on some of our conference periods, and if you want Katie to work with you a little closer, we could do that. If you want Katie to come in and co-teach on one of your periods, we could probably work out someone to cover the classes. I have a period that I can give up my conference period to go in on one of the
They
class
are
times.
eager to go into one another's classroom and observe to see how teachers are using these strategies with students. And so together they will be able to implement a set of strategies.
X minus 2 equals -3.
Milbury McLaughlin and Joan Telbert, who've done a tremendous amount of research in high schools around the country, have looked at what happens when departments within high schools collaborate, share expertise, and share work. And what they've discovered is that not only are teachers more satisfied with the work that they're doing, but they are also finding that their teaching is higher quality and students are achieving more.
We need to kind of discuss our data and what formal and informal assessments are showing us about the targeted sub-pops that we're working with as well.
Okay. Just in looking at everybody's data overall through our AWARE system, we saw that this was an area that we all need to work on. So in the past, we've talked about having a common warm-up, that all of us are doing so that we can kind of hit it. So who would like to design a warm-up for the next 5 days to kind of make sure that we're doing the two-step equation, and then just
They talked about a common instructional practice using a warm-up activity for 5 days, and how one teacher was going to be able to develop that for the whole team so other teachers didn't have to do that same work.
That's okay, Ms. Coney? Okay. So let's kind of have that, I would say, by the end of the week, if you can work it in your schedule, and it will start
And
next
then
week.
they'll concentrate their effort for 5 days on this particular area and spread instruction and reinforcement throughout the school year.
They had to make up their own problem. They had to solve it. They had to have their correct answer in their multiple choices. But, like on their assessments, the other 3 multiple choice answers are the common error answers. So when the kids start thinking about, okay, well, what can somebody do to really mess up this problem, then that actually is going to make them think about their own work. And what
They were also able to identify how they were going to know whether or not their students were successful with this particular strategy, and how to map and align the assessment students take, the state assessment, with the instruction that they're doing in their classroom.
And I think another thing I'd like to see is how is it actually tested on the tax test? Because I know in our test that we gave today, the 3 that were tax formatted, the kids got right. So I want to make sure that we're teaching it the way it's tested, because clearly we didn't do as good a job with that last year, and that's why the tech was lower. And I think we've revamped some of the things, like this is the making it from an equation to from the word problem to an equation is how it's tested. So we revamped that and we spent more time on it. So if we're not teaching it the way they're going to see it, we need to fix that on the test.
So in very little time, this team of teachers enacted the cycle of continuous improvement, using data, identifying goals for their student learning, figuring out what they needed to learn and be able to do, figure out the strategies that they were going to use to put it into practice, and they're ready to go.